Welcome back to the Make One Day Happen podcast. It's your girl, Sheena Jean, and today's guest is a special treat. We have got CJ Johnson in the house. He is an award-winning storyteller, content creator, and media strategist. He's also a GQ magazine insider, and he delivers stylish and creative, uplifting content to more than 200,000 social media followers, including celebrities, world-class athletes, TV personalities, political leaders, and others around the world. He is listed as one of the top creators to watch and rising voices in media. CJ receives over 6.9 million monthly impressions across all of his social channels. That's a lot of fucking eyeballs, y'all. That is a lot of eyeballs. He's been featured in GQ Magazine, Forbes, Adweek, Men's Health, The Huffington Post, ESPN, and more. He is the former co-founder of a top ad agency, J&J, and CJ is considered one of the leading global minds on the creator economy, social media marketing, brand strategy, and cultural trends. He has successfully supported hundreds of small businesses to Fortune 500 companies around the globe. CJ currently serves as a Cancer Research Institute advocate, a Walmart civic engagement consultant, Adweek creator, Google Next Gen Tech policy leader, and an impact venture partner at the Founder Institute, which is the world's largest pre-seed startup accelerator. This man has his hands in a lot of things, y'all. And I tell you right now, his stories are one of my favorite places on the internet. He's got phenomenal content, whether it's showing the vibes of where he's visiting. He's got great photography. I love the things that he reposts. They're extremely relevant. He's just got a keen eye for content creation and connecting with his social media audience. And we've been internet friends for a long time. And now we're like doing a real life thing because CJ just dropped his first book called The Maguire Method. And I am really, really, really excited to dive in with him. CJ, we actually, the first time that we connected was through Outsite, and
Yeah.
it was the core values workshop. It was like core values was
Yeah.
definitely my jam. Love me some core values. And so that feels like a lifetime ago. And now here we are. You've circled back around, and I'm going to let you take it over and let people know who you be, how you got to this point, and tell us a little bit about the Maguire Method.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, first of all, thank you for that introduction.
Yeah, let's
I
go full
feel
send
way
on
cool. I
intros. That's
feel so
always.
much cooler than I actually am. Thanks.
I think you're
Um,
pretty dope. So glad to have you
thank you.
here, and good luck following up my intro of you.
Okay, I'm just gonna leave now.
Okay, and that's all.
And that's a wrap. Yeah, I guess I'll just talk a little bit about my book. I really appreciate that introduction. I'm really happy to be here and be able to chop it up with you. I know you're always doing amazing things, so I know this is going to be a really fun conversation for us.
Yeah.
So the Maguire Method is I'd like to refer to this as your go-to handbook for overcoming today's challenges to
Ooh.
find success and happiness. It's not a hokey self-help personal development book. What it actually is something that I always wanted to do. Is I always wanted to write a book. Obviously, I've been able to do a lot of awesome creative things, but I always wanted to write a book, like a trilogy of like nonfiction books, and one would be about money and business, because obviously I have so much experience in that from so many different walks of life, and then love and relationships, and then finally one that's like self discovery. So I
Mm.
kind of see this as like the first part of a bigger trilogy. So I created this,
Ooh.
right?
I love this.
I mean, step one is finding yourself, right?
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do was I wanted to explore all of these things that we're facing today in today's society. Mental health crisis is like, it's a thing now. It's like the biggest issue that we're facing today is mental health crisis.
Yep.
And it's so interesting because this is also the most connected and access that we have to each other, yet people feel extremely lonely on a level that they never have before.
Yep.
Emerging generations are really suffering. Teenage suicide is at a really large rate, an alarming rate. Men are suffering really well. It seems like women are doing a pretty good job of really trying to understand mental health
Turns
and like
out
support
feeling
each other.
your feelings is a healthy thing.
Yeah. Who would have known? Like, who would have known
Who
women are
would have thought?
brilliant? Who would have known? Um, I mean, I could have guessed it, but yeah. So I wanted to devise something that was easy to digest. I feel
Yeah.
like there was a lot of information out there that some people can't relate to. So I wanted to make something that was very relatable. I broke it down to four core principles, which we're obviously going to discuss. And I came up with the name, the Maguire Method. Why is it called that? Honestly, it is because I love pop culture references. I would have named it a song. I would have named it something like I love like The Secret. I love like The Principles, and if it was up to me, I would have just had a fucking logo on there, and people would have been like, "What is this? What does this symbol mean? What is this pyramid?" And an eye. I would have did that whole thing. But what I ended up doing was Maguire. The reason why it's spelled the way it is I was I was inspired by Jerry Maguire. It's one of my favorite romantic comedies of all time. And if you've seen the movie, it's a lot about a man who is on this journey of self-discovery. He has everything that you would want to have on a very superficial level, including relationships. And then
Yeah.
he discovers less is more, and like discovers the beauty of simplification and minimalism in a very different way, and finding more success and happiness through that journey. So that's why it was just like a tongue-in-cheek reference. But yeah, that was the reason why I came up with that. The catalyst for this book was that I was finding a lot of success in life. I found a lot of early success. I'm a bit of a world traveler. Again, that's how we met outside. For those of you who don't know, it's a digital nomad situation. It's awesome for entrepreneurs that love to travel. And I had a broken heart.
Mm.
Um, and I had two choices. When I looked in the mirror, I had two choices. I could be either the guy that's like, she sucks, she's terrible, what's her problem, her loss. Me and my friends, we're gonna get wasted. I'm gonna find some other girl very quickly. I'm gonna make as much money as I can. She's really gonna suffer. She's gonna come crawling back. And that was one of the choices. The other choice was, why don't I take ownership of what's going on in my life, and why don't I do something new? Because I think the other one was a very easy route to take that I knew what the result would be. So I decided to transform my life. That was taking care of my body in a very different way, taking care of my mind in a very different way, taking care of my spirit, reading a lot, doing a lot of research, doing a lot of work, as they say, the self
Yeah.
work. And one of the challenges that I was finding was that I couldn't find any sort of literature that talked about the things that were going on with my generation and younger. And
Yeah.
I started to see a correlation in that a lot of the personal development and self help space was, kind of middle aged white men. And the advice that they were giving was great, but it had nothing to do with today's reality. And then obviously, what do we have access to? We have social media, we have blogs, and all of that is digestible in these bite sized situations. And the thing about the digital age in which we live in is that so much information is out there that you don't quite know what's accurate, what's not. And obviously there's something for everybody. But I'm an old school dude. I love literature. I love to physically be able to hold something. So that's why this is like a handbook. So I wanted to do that with well thought out research. The through line is me and my experiences. So we're going on this journey together as you're reading this book. And yeah, I mean, when my first copy editor got a hold of it, she was like, "You're talking about this breakup way too. Who is this for? What do you like? What is this about?" And I'm glad that she did that because without giving anything away, I think you know this because you read some of it. I changed the angle a little bit and I started and ended in a very different way. So the
Hmm.
breakup actually wasn't as big of a deal in the book as it originally was because I wanted to make it more relatable. Now, one of the things that also came up in my research was I emailed Mark Manson, the author of the
Subtle Art
Subtle
of
Art,
Not Giving a Fuck. Yeah.
the
Love
man.
that guy. He's one of the best philosophers of our generation, hands
I
down.
agree, hands
Yeah.
down, hands down. And see, that's the thing.
Have
It's
you
like
seen
I
the
don't want to,
movie?
huh?
Have you seen the movie?
I haven't seen the movie yet. No, the Netflix documentary, right? Is
No,
there a show now?
it's on Apple TV. I was literally like,
Okay.
I'm like, am I gonna spend $5 to watch this tonight, or am I gonna do that this weekend while I actually like stay awake and watch it?
Yeah, no, I know. I no, I absolutely should. No, I'm glad that you reminded me. And now I'm gonna put
Yeah,
on
same.
my
It
to watch
came up
this.
this week for me. I was like, oh yeah, I was so
Yes.
stoked about that, and I completely forgot.
Shame, I forgive it. Yeah, there's just so much to go. There's so much out there to see.
So much
Um,
content.
but I emailed him and I asked him. I was like, what's the number one question that you get asked the most that people like come to you for? And he said a lot of it was like love and heartbreak.
Hmm.
And so I started. So through my own actual experiences dealing with all of these business leaders, extremely successful people from all walks of life, there was just always this need of being seen and heard. And our careers and our work life is so tied to our personal life in a way that it's kind of silly to separate the two. I think that's sort of a right. That's kind of the
No,
lie.
that is like literally the core tenet of my I'm writing a book, my book, and my work is like we
Yes,
compartmentalize, we separate
yes,
personal and professional development, and it's
yes.
fucking bullshit. The sooner
It's
that we
bullshit.
bring it all together and
I agree.
recognize that
I
what's
agree.
showing up in one is showing up in the other and vice versa, then
Yeah.
you accelerate your performance in all areas.
Agreed. And I'm assuming the assumption would be that it's a generational thing.
Yeah,
And obviously our generation is saying that, like, which is the reason why remote work is such a big deal, because younger generations are like, well, I don't want to go into the office anymore. I want to travel around the world. I want to be able to see I'll take less money to do that, to have the freedom.
right.
And then older generations are like, well, but you haven't learned the social skills yet that you need to thrive in the world. That's why we need you here in office. And those and both the philosophies are actually both accurate and correct. It's just that, like you said, we're seeing it as two separate verticals. But the most of your life is going to be lived at work. So work is a
Exactly.
huge deal,
Huge
right?
deal. It's a huge,
Huge
huge,
deal. It's
huge,
a,
huge. Oh, that guy's good for something, I suppose.
yeah.
You've said so many things that there's a couple things that I want to circle back to.
Sure.
I'm part of the divorcee club too. Just some
Awesome.
beautiful things that come from heartbreak and divorce, and there's kind of two roads that you get to pick in that situation.
Absolutely.
That the world makes it very easy to choose option one. Oh, fuck
Absolutely.
him, he's a
Absolutely.
piece of shit. Blah 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 blah.
Absolutely.
Or for me, it was this. Actually, I want to understand what because we're co-creators in everything, whether it's
Everything.
marriage, a business, our life. And it's like, what is the shit that I was bringing to the table that I
Mhm.
couldn't see for myself? And what do I need to shift so that I
Yeah.
never have? There were some beautiful things about that relationship for sure. And I
Mhm.
never want to show up like this in a relationship ever again. Like
Absolutely.
I want to be completely
Absolutely.
I want to heal the shit that I just uncovered in this mess that did not work out. That was the most beautiful mess that I needed. However, not what I am choosing to stay in and what needs to shift from there. And so I really resonate with that part of your journey because the world really wants you to be bitter and
Yeah.
cynical and drag that person through the mud
Oh
and
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
all,
yeah,
just
it's
like, ew, divorce and make it this
divorce.
horrible thing.
Yeah.
And it's
What
like, it doesn't have to be like that.
it
It
doesn't have
really
to be
doesn't.
like that. It doesn't have to be like that. And that's the way I start my book. My book is that you have choices. You have, in fact, you make thousands of choices every single day. And what we do, and again, I obviously explore this in the book, and give you some ways and how you can combat that. But what you're referring to is literally the difference between a scarcity mindset and a growth mindset. And that
Mm-hmm.
scarcity mindset is taking ownership of these labels and narratives and the stories that we hear and the stories and experiences that we see, and we forget the growth aspect, which is there's obviously more to this story. So when you decide that you want to be the main character, that you are the protagonist, and not in this bullshit way where you see the memes and you're like, yeah, I'm taking, yeah, whatever, fuck them. I mean it in a way of like you being open to change and open to seeing different perspectives of things, even if you, and it doesn't mean, and I think that's something that I also explore in the book as well, but we live in a culture now where there's a lot of virtue signaling going on, and there's a lot of people that like we take ownership of ego in the narrative in a way that we never have throughout history. It just was not a thing now. It's a thing now. It wasn't back then. So when you talk about that, some people are like, "Well, are you trying to tell me your side because you're trying to persuade me to go to your side?" It's like, dude, there has to be a level of coexistence and acceptance. If somebody can rock you from your own values and your own principles, then they weren't really solidified in the first place.
Right.
Which, right?
Right.
So that's not on that other person. That's on you. So for you to get offended and take, oh, I'm taking this so personal because I disagree with you. What are you gonna? What are you? Who are you upset with?
Right.
Who are you upset with?
I think, I mean, that right there speaks to, so the four things that CJ really goes into in his book, for those of you listening, and I love how simple this is. I love how simple this is because, like, even like in my own frameworks and what I teach, I'm like thought reprogramming and energy hygiene, and people are like, "What is
Yeah.
this shit?" I'm like, "I promise, it's really dope." And yours is yours is so simple, sir. It's simply this, right? Number one, questions. Number two, reflections. Number three, actions. Number four, habits. And uh, the best answers come from the best questions. And so, even starting with the question
Mhm.
of how do you want to show up in this breakup? How do you want to show up in this heartbreak?
Absolutely.
Who do you
Yeah.
want to be on the other side of this, right? Like, the
Yes. Yes.
quality of questions are going to determine the quality of our answers, and when we start asking different questions, we start getting different realities that we get to create for
Oh,
ourselves.
absolutely. And and to be honest, when you the exactly what you said, when you're able to do that, there is a level of like a hack, because I know that's like I try not to say that a lot, but everybody's always looking for a life hack and a shortcut. But the shortcut is asking better questions. So there are bad
100%.
questions, right? There's good questions and there's great questions. So the difference between all three is that, for example, a breakup, a bad question is what did I do wrong, and like what's wrong with them for them not seeing the value in which I have. A good question is, okay, well, now that they're not here, like, what can I do? And the reason why that's just a good question and not a great question is because that's too vague. Now, a
Mhm.
great question is, you know, um, what was it that I really enjoyed about that person, and what is it, what is it that I'm trying to attract next?
Yep.
Or you can be even more specific. What's the one thing that I always wanted to do that I couldn't because they weren't into it that I can do now?
Yep.
And that one is a great question because that gives you something specific of a goal and an actionable step to take. And that's the way that we want to see it. And we want to do it in a healthy way. And again, we're all on our own journey. We're all gonna like this isn't a guide to be perfect, and nothing's ever gonna be perfect.
Mm.
It's dealing with the imperfections of life and being okay with that and having a level of acceptance and pride, and on days that you feel like shit, it's not the end of the world. When you're upset with somebody, it's not the end of the world. It's not a make or break situation. The life isn't breaking you. Nobody's out to get you. When it rains, it doesn't pour. That's not the way that we look at things. When it rains and pours, dance in the rain. It's as simple as that.
Mhm.
Or stay inside and cozy up with a book.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much of, you know, the shift in mindset that I always am grounding myself in, my clients, people that I work with in, is like, how do we get out of like this is happening to me
Mhm.
into why is this happening for me? What is here
Absolutely.
for me
Yeah.
to glean from this? What am I taking away? And I think especially in heartbreak, it's so easy to be like, it's what they did, and I wasn't getting
Yeah.
this, and I wasn't
Oh,
getting
yeah.
this, and it's like, well, that person's no longer here, and what are you left with? Right.
Oh
And
my
like,
God. Well, I always tell people this, and it's like obviously like I'm not talking about extreme situations of like abuse or anything like that, but when you date somebody, you break up and then you trash them, that says a lot about you as well. Because it's like at one point in time, you were like intimate with that
yeah,
person.
you were all about it there
You're
for a
all about
while.
you're all about it until it didn't work out. So maybe you're giving yourself more grace, not giving them a pass, but you're giving yourself more grace because
Mm,
you're like, okay, well, there was something about that I liked, and maybe I don't like that anymore. Maybe I do like that. I just didn't like that with that person. And that's like a better way of exploratory exploration. So for me, when I was thinking of these principles, I essentially was like, okay, what are the things that you can do, and then like you were just saying, I can give you the complexities and the steps and the challenges and why it's hard to do some of these things and why you can make it easy to apply it to your everyday life. So when we talk about questions, it's obviously like talking about questions from the perspective of you understand your principles, you understand your core values, you understand who you are, you understand what you want. And then the second part of that with the reflections is taking the time to be self-aware. And when you're asking questions, I want you to ask questions of yourself and ask questions of your environment and the world around you. Think about this. What would you say right now is people's biggest fear today?
Ooh, I mean, there's just so many.
There's so
there's,
many.
there's
There's
there's so many. Um,
not clowns.
Not clouds. Did you say
Not clowns.
clouds?
Not clowns. Not
Oh,
clowns.
oh,
The answer is
clowns,
not clowns.
clowns. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely right up there on my list. That's a really interesting question, right? I guess I would say probably somewhere in the realm of like survival, right? I
Okay.
feel like there's a
Okay.
lot of like, am I going to make it, like
Okay.
survival scarcity energy
Okay.
that fear keeps us in, would be kind of where my brain's going first. But I'm curious to hear
That's
what,
interesting. So
yeah.
so that, I mean, that's like I think that kind of ties into the answer. Statistically, it's being alone with your thoughts for
Mm.
15 minutes. People are more afraid to be alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes than they are of dying, that they are of like clowns and snakes and spiders, but just being alone with their thoughts. So when we talk about reflection, for somebody like yourself, obviously you're doing breath work, you meditate, it's a discipline that you learn over time. But some people are so scared to learn the discipline. And that is the reason why we have to ask questions. Because when we ask questions, we're reframing things. And it's
Hmm.
like, what's the big deal to take 15 minutes every day to meditate? Well, because well, okay, great. Ask yourself why that's such a big deal for you. Like, who's stopping you from doing that? I don't have enough time. You don't have 15 minutes out of your day. What about 10? What about 5? And by the way, what is meditation to you? Are you asking yourself what meditation is? Because meditation is just honestly just being still and thinking, and being still and being present.
Hmm.
And even if you are overthinking, if you do it over time, as you know this, you're not gonna be ruminating as much.
Yep.
So again, if you ask questions and then you reflect, and then that third principle is action, taking bold action. I really wanted to examine the actions that would really give you the opportunity to thrive, right? Not survive, but thrive. And then the fourth and final and toughest principle there is habits. Now, I think anybody would understand if you have a good, healthy habit, habitual routine, you're going to find success, you're going to find happiness. Of course, it's hard to do. Why? Because we don't see immediate results. Why is that a big deal? Because we live in a world now where we get
Swipe,
immediacy results.
swipe, swipe,
Everything.
swipe. It's here now.
It's
Click,
here now.
done.
It's here now.
Here's my drone delivering my Amazon product.
Absolutely.
There's my 5-course meal in the microwave. Like we live, it's the microwave society. We can
It's
have
a microwave
everything
society.
instantly.
You can swipe for anything. So it seems like you're doing something wrong when
Yeah.
it takes time, when in reality it's supposed to take time. I always tell this to people. I go, the things that you want the most in life are always going to be the hardest to get. So if you think for one moment that you're going to like swipe right, fall in love on the first date, or oh, it didn't work out on the first date, didn't work out on the second date, you're like, this is stupid, this is a waste of my time. It's like, dude, you do realize that like the more time you spend with somebody, the more they get to know you, the more you get to know them, and then you have that opportunity to be like, I'm in or I'm out. But you don't do that by like testing them. Like 3 strikes, you're out. It doesn't work like that because you're missing out on actually finding somebody. Same thing with work. It's like you can quit your job if you want, if it's not right for you. Do you really think you're never going to work again? Like, is that what you're afraid of?
Right.
Or you can figure out ways to improve your current work situation. Is it a communication issue? Is it an issue that like you're just kind of stagnant with certain things? let's explore this, and we can explore this with the first three principles, right? We can figure out a way to make this a habitual routine. And when you have it as a habitual routine, a lot of these things that might sound kind of complex and difficult, and wow, that's a lot. Like Sheena and CJ are talking about a lot of stuff. Well, it becomes like a muscle. It's like muscle memory. Again, when you practice something over and over again, it's not difficult at all. If anything, it's going to save you more time and it's going to enhance your life.
That part. That's the part that people don't understand enough about meditation is when you create space to sit and be still
Mm-hmm.
with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
to reconnect to a source of energy that's greater and outside of you and way more fucking intelligent than
Oh yeah.
us.
Oh yeah.
Like you get downloads,
Yeah.
you get the to-do list that you need for the day through that versus
Yeah.
just running around like a chicken with your head cut off trying to get to all the different things and all the different blah, 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 blah. Like
Absolutely.
your actions become so much more potent if you give yourself that time and space to plug in first and fill up your
Yes.
own cup, and
Yeah.
you're able to literally source more energy to bring into the
Yes.
actions and the
Yeah.
habits that you're performing. So
Mhm.
it's yeah, I mean, a big part of what I do is helping people get into a meditation practice. And it's so funny hearing the shit that people say, oh, I'm just not good at it. I'm like, you're not
Yeah.
fucking special. Nobody's
It's
good at it.
I mean, when you realize that like you're really special, when you realize that like it's such a difficult task for people to be alone with themselves, I don't. And see, that's another thing too, is that like when I wrote this book, I wanted this to be relatable for everyone. I didn't write this just for women. I didn't write this just for men. I didn't write this just for people of color. I didn't write this. I wrote this in a way where it's like somebody can take something from this, because I do feel like I don't want to shame somebody for not being able to meditate. What I would say is that just what you said. It's like you're wrong if you think that if you stretch yourself as far as you can to make something work, that it's going to work. If it's just like a rubber band, you stretch it too far, it's gonna snap. And what you're saying is something that really needs to be admired and respected, which is like you gotta fill your own cup. You fill your own cup. That's why a journey of self discovery is so important. It's
Mhm.
not because you're just like being frou frou and you're just like I'm a wanderlust. It's like because if you take the time out to know yourself, you get to understand so much more about life, and then outwardly it's a big deal. And one of the things that I found that was very difficult for people with making habits was that a lot of times it's because of their environment, and the people that they have around them don't reinforce those good habits, right? So that
Yes.
so that narrative isn't just a you thing, it's also reinforced by the environment you in. So I do provide tips and strategies on how you can curate your environment. And community is huge. I know that there's some YouTube, or some, not YouTube, but social media videos I put out there of like, 6 types of toxic friends, 7 types of people that you need in your inner circle. I have that in the book. But yeah, it's so important, because that is how you're really going to find that next level of what you're looking for.
Absolutely. Oh man, there's so many things that you said. Okay, let me go back here. A community, we're going to circle back around to that
Sure,
because community activation is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I've
of
opened
course.
two different social clubs, one in Phoenix, one in Aspen, Colorado.
Right.
Tulsa, y'all's next. And going back to before that, right? Like,
Mhm.
before we started recording, we were talking about VCs, startup culture, a bit of that grind
Yep.
and that
Yep.
like that grind and hustle, right? Like,
Yep.
and one of the things that I find after working with founders for the well over 10 years of my
Mhm.
career at this point now is getting them to recognize how important their meditation practice, their gratitude practice, their energy hygiene in
Mhm.
general is
Mhm.
literally the most important asset of their business. Your
Yeah.
business doesn't go if you're burnt out. It just
Well,
doesn't, right? And
It-
so
It's it's interesting to hear you say that. What would you say, out of your 10 years of experience, would you say is the number one thing that you think founders get wrong, like when they fail, like why they failed, and the number one reason why you think they found the most success?
I think that it comes down to probably energy hygiene. a
Okay.
founder that is willing to make space for themselves, right? And that looks different. Energy hygiene to me looks different for everybody. The way
Okay.
that you meditate is not necessarily going to be the exact same way that I meditate, right?
Okay. Right. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
there's going to be different practices. So I talk about the idea that there's going to be cognitive practices that we need to be doing, and there's somatic practices, so mind and body.
Hmm.
And while
Hmm.
cold showers might really work for me, you might be like, nah, fuck that. Like, I'm going to go
Right.
for a cold
Yes.
plunge instead,
Yes.
or something
Yes.
different, right? Like, you might
Yes.
really fuck with acupuncture, but for me, chiropractic is the thing that's really
Yes.
rewiring and repatterning my energy. So there's different strokes for different folks, just like we all need to brush our teeth. We don't all have to brush in the exact same way in the exact same
Absolutely.
strokes, right? It's
Yeah.
just, are you willing to prioritize yourself and your energy and that in order to show up more fully? Or are you going to be on that grind so much that
Right.
you wake up immediately into your inbox, immediately into your dues,
Yeah.
self-sacrificing everything for the business and for the investors and the upcoming board meeting and then
Yeah.
your team and your people, and you've just got nothing left. You're like, that
Absolutely.
is just a recipe for burnout and disaster, and it's
Oh,
not
100%.
sustainable. It's not
It's not
sustainable at
sustainable.
all.
It's
Yeah.
never sustainable. It's never sustainable. I mean, that's the word that I think of, sustainability. And you're absolutely correct. There is and I think that's the not I think, but that's the misconception that's out there. Is like there's like this one size fits all strategy, and maybe the Maguire method is that, but
Well,
but
and I would offer that it's a framework that you
it's a
get to
framework.
personalize within it, right? Like,
Exactly. Yeah. That was my whole point, is that I wanted people to read my book, or even in encountering me and listening to me and speaking with me and spending time with me, is that I want you to walk away feeling more empowered
mhm.
than you were before. And the way that we can empower ourselves is by learning something new that we didn't learn before, and then also reinforcing some ideas. Maybe you're kind of on the fence of like meditating, and you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I definitely need to meditate now. For me, I didn't even really I didn't really put a lot of thought into this until fairly recently. But I've been journaling since I was 13 years old.
Mm.
So I have a plethora of information of like my trajectory in life, and like did it work out the way I imagined, and like, what did I care about when I was younger and what do I care about now? And that gave me a different level of self-awareness. So sometimes I am able to just sort of separate myself and take out that time to journal and be a little bit analytical about things, but that works for me. I know some people, like I say journaling, and they literally cry for like, oh, I can't, no, I don't, what I gotta like, and they, in their mind they're just like, I gotta get a notebook and I gotta write it out. I don't know who, and I'm just literally like, dude, like, it's not
This
that.
is this is such an interesting topic that you're bringing up. So metacognition, are you familiar with that word?
Metacognition, for the listeners that don't know.
The ability to think about our thoughts,
Yeah,
right? And so there's it's a word that I think they are hiding from us.
yeah, yeah,
My day was in air quotes.
yeah,
They're hiding from us because the more metacognition that we have
yeah.
as a people and as an individual, the more power that we're going to begin to gain once we start
Oh
to
yeah,
understand that our thoughts, we are not our thoughts, right? And so
oh
the
yeah.
three kind of, I would say, two fastest ways to understanding what's happening in your mind is through meditation and through
Mhm.
journaling. I
Absolutely.
also, I are you're an 80s baby?
Yeah.
You give 80s baby vibes.
Oh, okay, sweet. I hope that's
That's a
amazing.
great thing. I'm an 80s baby as well.
Okay,
80s baby as
because
well.
the 80s are awesome, everybody.
Um, had a little mic slip there, but I think we're all good and rolling.
Yeah,
Um, so 80s babies are we're honestly the most important generation of humanity, in my humble opinion,
sure.
because we had an analog childhood
Yes,
and had technology
yes,
introduced to us at an
yes,
early enough age that we could adapt
yes,
to it, whereas the generations behind us
yes,
don't have that link to technology like we do. And the
yes.
generations in front of us will never know life without a screen.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I think you hit something you hit something. I it was good that what you just said was gonna be like a whole chapter in my book, and I took it out because it was but because I was like, it's kind of hard to explain that, like what you just said, because nobody really talks about that a lot. I think they just sort of like throw in the like, millennial this, millennial that, and it's just like, dude, like I remember, the like TV becoming a bigger deal, internet becoming a bigger deal, and me having
Internet
access to these things.
period being born,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
we grew up in the age where we got our internet on a CD, y'all. Like
yeah,
in the
yeah.
mail to be
Dial
able
up,
to
dude.
go get on the
Yeah.
internet.
So
And there's
to your point, it made us not fear technology. I think that the thing that it did do was that we didn't get to see what all these older generations kind of like promised us, I suppose, because the world just changed so rapidly with conflict, and accessibility, and this is the financial system just like really took this really weird left turn as we were becoming adults, that we never had the same accessibility as older generations. And then obviously younger generations have so much accessibility that, we kind of get this label of being like haters. We kind of get this label of being like disconnected. But, that's just because of what you said. It's like, dude, well, we saw like we kind of saw a little bit of everything, which is extraordinarily interesting. I feel like that should be talked about and studied, to your point, a little bit more, because, you know, I mean, so much happened. Like, just so much happened. Like, if it by the time that I die, there might be AI overlords. We probably will be colonizing on another planet. Like, I'm like, that's not far away. Self-driving cars, like, none of that is far away. And then on the other side of it, climate change. Like, climate change was like not a serious threat.
we might wipe ourselves out before
We might,
we.
we don't know. It's just all these
Not
things
to
like you said.
mention, not to mention, this is another one of my controversial opinions. Is there's obviously when we're recording this, there's a lot going on in the world right now. Israel and Palestine
Mm-hmm.
are in it, and my opinion of war is it's showing on a collective level the
Mm-hmm.
inability that we have to sit and reconcile the wars within ourselves, right? Like if
Ooh,
we can't
yeah,
sit
yeah.
with ourselves for 15 minutes and watch what's happening there and learn how to be with those uncomfortable emotions and
Mm-hmm.
those false narratives that we actually have a choice to disengage from, and we just
Absolutely.
are constantly spewing and projecting that on other people, that's
Yeah,
how we get to situations like we're seeing in Israel and Palestine. And so when I
yeah.
say sit your ass down and meditate and actually pray for what's happening over there right now, like
Mhm.
we could legitimately shift some things if people would
I
actually
agree.
choose to do
Yeah.
that.
You know what? You know what? That's a really good point. This has been on my mind for quite some time. Obviously, it's like, I'm releasing my book. I'm talking about all these like topics, and and one of the things, and again, I dive into this in the book, so you have to get the book if you're listening. But one of the things
Watching
that
on YouTube, I also just want to show you how beautiful
there
this
you
is.
go. By the way,
Hey,
that's all my photography. That's all
I know.
my.
We're,
Is
we
that
haven't even got
wild?
to the part where we talk about the clouds yet. We've got a cloud. That's when you said clowns earlier. I was like, what did you say, clouds?
Did somebody say clouds?
Did somebody say
I was asking myself, and I was thinking on a little bit about what you just said, and there's a lot of key takeaways that I hope people get from this situation in the Middle East. One, questions. You should be asking questions about what you do and do not know versus your assumptions about anything.
mm-hmm.
And where are you getting your information from? And how accurate is that information? And you honestly need to be thinking about that. Now, I am only going to speak through the lens of a, for lack of better words, a westernized American. My dad is in the U.S. Army, retired, um, um, and I think that it's safe to say that I might be a good example of like somebody that grew up not knowing the difference between Palestinian and Israel. Everything in the Middle East is the same, because none of that. was really, if you're not from that culture and you're in America, it's not something that is, you know what I
Because
mean?
America doesn't really teach outside
America.
of our
If you
lines, right?
if you grew up in America, America's number one. Everybody else is second, and like who cares? So in reality, when we're asking ourselves these questions and we're thinking about it, it would be a really good idea if you were to maybe jot down what you're learning
Mm.
and take bold action and sharing what you're learning and saying like, hey, I didn't know any of these things, I don't even know if I'm right, I don't know, but I think the action that I'm taking is sharing my own personal experiences versus repurposing or resharing something that you saw in a soundbite or on social media, and then making that type of conversation habitual. And I
Mhm.
think that even you reaching out to somebody that is Jewish, is Palestinian, and asking them what their perspective is. And to your point, why is there so much volatility now? And I'm not talking about what's going on with the surging violence. I'm not talking about that, but just like, how can we resolve this? What would you like to see happen? What would you like to see happen for this to work out? Now, obviously, if you explore this, and this is specific to this topic, you're going to hear very specific answers, but also you're going to hear a lot of pain and anger and frustration. You're going to hear that more than anything. And Sheena, this is the biggest takeaway that anybody listening to this has to understand. We cannot repeat the mistakes of the past. We cannot repeat the mistakes of the past. We are the generation of change. If
Mhm.
you are not going to be a conduit of change, then you're just repeating the pattern. What's happening right now in the Middle East is not new. This is not new information. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry if you're just now hearing about it and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. This has been going on since before I was even fucking born. And this conflict never stopped. And it's still evolving. And the only way that we can stop it is by actually formulating some sort of game plans and dialogue and community between each other where we can be a voice of change. And I don't think, and I'm just, again, this is just me as as from my own perspective and observationally speaking, I don't think the things that worked before are going to work now because the world is different now and culture is different now. And by the way, we all have silos now. Like, you can't help it. That's just sort of the way that the world works now. You want to break free from those silos. You listen to this podcast, you read my book, you find new ways to break out of that.
We're
But
the silo
we're the
breakers.
silo breakers. We're the silo breakers. But you should understand that. You should understand that, like, you are in a silo, but you have to break free from that. So again, it's like, it's not helping anything if you're just going to argue with other people to get your point across, because at the end of the day, the whole point is to grow and change. Now, why do we feel so amped up and angry and sad and like, why do you think this way? At the end of the day, how do we coexist with one another? Like, do we really want to be in this constant conflict? Like, is that seriously how we want to show up in the world? Like, when we really break it down, do you seriously just want to live a life where you're constantly being known as somebody that's instigating, hating, argumentative, repeating things that have already been done? All of those things that happened in the past have happened. When we deal with traumatic situations, we have to accept that that happened, and we have to find ways to move forward with our lives and find ways to mitigate triggers, right? But it already happened. So if we play things over again in our mind, it's not happening. We ground ourselves to remind ourselves that it's not happening now. Like, that's already happened. So when you talk about generational traumas from the situation that happened in the Middle East, you talked about generational traumas of all these different cultures that are still experiencing things. We have to figure out, okay, well, what do we do next? Is it easy? No, because if it was, then we would have already been doing it. But it gets easier when we find methods, the Maguire method. No, we find ways to do that with one another, and we take on that challenge, not the challenge of telling you or showing you how wrong stupid you are and I'm right, but the challenge of saying, this is what probably needs to change. How can we help with that?
Right. I think, oh, so much goodness there. So much good stuff. There's community, kind of circling back around to that. Community is such a vital, important part of it. And, um, when I was in Phoenix, I was running a wellness based social club, and that space was so many different things and really taught me on a deep, like visceral soul level how important it is that we create safe spaces
Mm-hmm.
for people of all types,
Mm-hmm. I agree.
this as diverse as possible, like
Yeah,
literally no sort of thing, right? And there are certainly going to be times and places where like women's only, men's groups
absolutely.
and BIPOC groups and
Yeah,
LGBT, like not to shame the work that happens in those spaces. It's important to have that. However, if we really want to accelerate humanity's healing, we got to
absolutely.
do it together.
Absolutely.
We have to
Absolutely.
learn how to feel safe and get vulnerable and actually do some of these somatic practices like breath work and sound healing and cold plunging and
Yeah.
these things that release trauma from our body. We need to do some of
Yeah.
the more cognitive things where we talk about mindset, where we learn how to meditate, where we do some visualizations, and we need to play
Absolutely.
together. We need to play together.
Oh
We
my
need
God.
to
Thank you. You took the
karaoke, and we just need to like
you took the
dance
words
and
right out of my mouth.
all of it. Like we just need to like
Yeah.
let our guards down and not take ourselves so seriously in
That's
this.
another thing. Why are we taking ourselves so seriously? Like we're bumming each other out. It's really
We're
ridiculous. You
we're
know?
being a real bummer right now. We
Yeah.
are being a real
We're
bummer
being a
right
real bummer. Yeah. I was it's funny because again, it it is because there's so much information that we're being overloaded with. There's so many choices out there. We feel kind of like it's this feeling of being overwhelmed and feeling like you're not on top of something. Maybe there's something you don't quite know, and that makes you a little bit anxious. And then you make a decision, and you're like, well, maybe I'm missing out on something. And then it puts you on this edge. And as we continuously see all of this like conflict in the world, it does go in the back of our minds. It's not in the forefront. I honestly do think, there obviously are exceptions to this, obviously. But I think for the most part, most people aren't trying to like hurt one another. They're just trying to like survive and be heard and be seen and live their lives. And if we can be more jovial with each other, if we can find ways to learn from one another and embrace growth versus scarcity, and I do, and this is the reason why community is so special, because if you are in an environment and a community that reinforces a scarcity way of thought, right, then it's hard for you to break free from that. Like it's almost impossible, because no matter what you do, your environment is going to reinforce all of these old bad habits, right? So
now. Yep.
again, if you live in a house, right, and everybody is eating unhealthy, but you're saying to yourself, I want to go on a diet. Well, it's only be a matter of time before you're not going to be able to like stick to that diet routine,
Not
right?
sustainable.
It's not sustainable. So even when you're talking about like the CEO and the entrepreneur, being getting burned out is different now than it was even what I remember how long ago when I was doing this, because now you can get burned out by like doing shit that like you never even would have thought would have burnt you out, because you're just being overwhelmed by all of this shit. You don't think it's overwhelming you, but if you're exhausted by the end of the day and you're like, man, all I did was check my emails, and you're like, dude, yeah, that's because you're being overloaded with a lot of information. We wake up, we immediately grab our cell phones, our mobile devices. So we're being reactive immediately as soon as we wake up. Usually we're on our devices when we go to bed. So we're being reactive from the moment that we wake up to the moment that we go to sleep. So I don't like to lie to people and be like, or not lie, but I feel like a lot of the things that you would suggest someone do to better their lives, pre pandemic, there's a countdown going on.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
yeah. Okay. I don't know. Maybe, yeah. I don't know what that was. Okay. FYI, there was a countdown, so I don't know if you heard what I was saying.
Now I hear what you're saying.
Okay.
Juju, we're gonna need some support here.
Juju, where are you?
Juju.
Slide in there. But no, I was just saying that like pre-pandemic, there were some tips and strategies that I would suggest post-pandemic. I can't suggest those same strategies and tips because we live in a different world now. We also got into this habitual routine of avoiding one another. We did. People forget that. That is something that we actually learned. That's a new learned behavior that the whole world did.
And not don't even I don't even know that we need to get started down this down this rabbit hole of what the pandemic did to fuck us up. But there's a lot. There's a lot of fear. There was a lot of social distancing when actually being in social connection with one another is one of the core foundational needs of being human,
Yeah,
right?
and
And
I'm sure it's a little bit of a shock to the system. It has to be, right? I think a lot of the conflict, some of that boiling over conflict is from like a year and a half, 2 years for some people, where you're like figuring out ways to like isolate yourself. So again, if I were to say, don't answer your phone first thing in the morning, I don't think that's a realistic ask at this day and age because you've already kind of, it's, you're going to do it regardless.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. It is a realistic ask.
Is it
There's,
a
I think
realistic ask?
I think it is. And I think that there's a lot, there's actually a really, I'll send it to you after this. Actually, I'll post this shit in the show notes. There's
Yeah.
an alarm clock that mimics sunrise
Oh yeah.
and sunset,
Oh, I know
right?
what you're talking about. Yes.
So this one's
Yes.
just about to, it launched on Kickstarter recently, and
Yes.
it's completely like there is no Bluetooth connection. There's not an app
I
to
love
it,
that.
but there's
Yeah.
enough time that it gives you in theta. And this is what I mean between like
Yes.
we are the gatekeepers
I
between
agree. I agree.
analog and the digital, that we have to recognize that we are headed down a path with technology that is very dangerous if we don't
Yeah,
hold on to some of the core things that make us human, like sticking our feet in
absolutely.
grass and
Yeah.
breathing and sitting still without a device. And
Yes.
like that's where I think that we get the opportunity. There's something you keep saying about the amount of information that we receive. So this statistic comes from like 2010,
Okay.
which let's just put in context there is like
Yeah.
really pre-social media,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like in like 2010, we received the same amount of information that someone in the 1800s, their entire lifetime, the amount of information that their brain got, we received in one day.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
from a biological standpoint,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have not evolved. Our nervous system, we have the same nervous system as
Yeah.
a caveman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are flooding it with information, and we're flooding it with visual stimulation like never
Oh my
before.
God. Yeah. Visual stimulation.
You
Yeah.
know, like the
Yeah.
blue lights, the
Yeah.
our neurochemicals are literally losing their shit based on everything that we're flooding and overwhelming our system. And to your point, we reach a freeze state where it's like I literally just checked my emails all day, if that, and
Yeah.
what did I do? And
Yeah.
I'm fucking fried.
Yeah.
So there is this
Yeah.
like, how do we start to teach people how important it is to actually unplug
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
how to disconnect in ways that will fill you back up so that you can come back to it in a more productive state? And
Absolutely.
it's tough. It's
Yeah, it
tough.
is. It
Like
is. It is. It is tough, and everybody is built differently. Some people can do these sort of situations like cold turkey, where they get super excited about it and they do it and they stick to it. Some people need incremental steps. Obviously, incremental progress is like much more better odds of success if you do it that way.
for sure.
And I think that to your point, if you do enough things, which is why actions was such a big deal for me. I feel like actions is kind of like the easy thing to do because obviously, you're like, well, if I want to get that app, then I'll get that app. Like I can do it right now. But what we want to do is we want to create enough action for ourselves that increases the odds of like achieving the goals that we're seeking, right? So that's the reason why the questions are so important because you have to be intentional about these things. You have to know where you're coming from, why you're doing it. I think that to your point, the inaction aspect of things is a really tough pill to swallow because it's affecting younger generations even more
Mm.
than it is even for somebody like you and I. We've lived like a life, we have experiences, so we know the difference between certain things as we're learning. But it's like that thing where like where somebody is like, like, oh, I want to quit my job and I want to work on my own. And why? Well, because I'm tired of like slaving away over here. I work all the time, and then they quit and they realize like, oh shit, like I'm working 5 times as harder and
Yeah.
longer than I did with the other thing. Maybe I should have stuck with that. But but that's only because you have to have that experience of what it is that you want. But that doesn't mean that you made the wrong choice. It just means that you have to find those experiences. So the same thing with like love. Like, oh, I want to fall in love with this person, but I can't never find them. They're not around, blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, give yourself the grace of time. But also, if you take some steps of asking, what is it that you really are looking for? Think about it, then take that action, make it habitual. Put yourself in winning situations. I say this to my guy friends all the time. They're like, I can't find anybody, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, what do you do? They're like, well, I get on Hinge, Tinder, Raya. Awesome. That's so cool. That's so great. Are you looking just to hook up with someone or are you looking to find your soulmate? Well, I mean, well, it would be nice to find my soulmate. Okay, cool. Like, where do you think your soulmate would actually be right now? Well, I don't know. Like, maybe at a conference. I don't, whatever they say. And I'm like, why are you not there? Why are you taking the easy route? And then why are you expecting the easy route, which you've done a million times before, to be different? And what's wrong with the harder route? Because that sounds so interesting, right? That sounds like a new experience, especially, right? If you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling stagnant or you're feeling depressed, try something new because what does that do? It like releases all these endorphins. It gets you excited. Your blood's pumping a little bit. You're nervous, obviously, but then you have that experience. And because you had that experience, and obviously you're going to find out what? It wasn't that bad. It really wasn't that bad. It was actually okay. It's the same thing. I live in Los Angeles. It's a high volume traffic city. It's notorious for two things. One being the loneliest city on the face of the planet. Two being one of the most populated cities on the face of the planet. Why is that? Because there's so much shit for people to do in Los Angeles. And a lot of people that go to Los Angeles go out to Los Angeles for themselves. It's usually like a career centric move. So there's no thoughts about community, there's no thoughts about love. In fact, when you're coming out, you're usually coming out alone. So you're saying to yourself, well, I came from this other place where obviously community was a big deal. I was a big deal, blah, blah, blah. And the rude awakening is that everybody else is on the same wave that you are, which is like, I'm out here for myself. So there is this need for community, but also it has to be on that person's terms, right? That's where it becomes lonely. That's where the dating part, or even work, like work, easy, community, hard.
Yeah.
And you don't know unless you take that leap of faith. So even you saying after a hard day's work, I'm gonna go meet up with Sheena for a drink. We're gonna talk about life. We got a lot of catching up to do. And then you flake. Well, you just did a disservice to both of you because what you just did was you missed out on an opportunity of connection which you sorely miss, and then you make that a habitual routine. Dude, you're primed for the opposite of success. You're primed for failure. Now what do you do if you go grab that drink? You have a fantastic time. You're alleviating pressure. She feels, you feel good, I feel good. It's like, oh man, I'm glad that I'm glad that I took out the time to do this. I'm glad that I actually did this. Like, yeah, this might be a little inconvenient for other stuff I got going on, but I'm glad I did this because it's making me feel better, and I feel much more connected to you. I feel much more connected to life. You go back home, you feel like you're priming yourself for more opportunities for success. But you have to take that leap of faith. It only becomes a leap of faith if you really didn't think it through. It only becomes a scary thing that's like hard to do when you make it hard to do. Again, ask yourself the right questions. Think about it. Just think about it, just for a little bit. Journal about it. Write it out. Look at your own words. Look at your own thoughts. Then all of a sudden, it's not that big of a deal, is it? And then if you do it again and again and again, you're priming yourself for success and happiness.
And I love what you're saying here because it becomes, I think anytime we take on something new, right? It's that like, oh, I got to learn something. And of course you're going to kind of suck at it. It's going to take longer and it's going to be this thing. And it's like, all right, I got to read this book. Now I got to ask myself questions. Now I got to reflect.
Yeah.
But the more you do it, then the more second nature it becomes.
The more second nature becomes.
Then it
Yes.
becomes a way of being versus a thing you got to do. And
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. Like, it's like, this is what evolution actually looks like. If
yeah.
anything, to your point, like we're kind of stagnating ourselves, or like we're kind of hurting ourselves. It's like I call it in a chapter the art of self-sabotage.
Mm,
Because, we're really like, you know, putting up barriers in front of ourselves, and then we're blaming other situations and other people when they have nothing to do about that. One of the most true things about life is that people don't give a shit about you as much as you want them to. Like,
mm,
it's just, that's just
facts.
the life. That's facts. That shouldn't hurt your feelings. That doesn't mean you're unimportant. It doesn't mean you don't if anything, what that means is that, like, oh wow, you have a lot more freedom of choice to live the life that you want for yourself than you ever thought. You thought that there's all these eyeballs on you. There's not. People don't care. People don't know. And then that's another thing too. In some ways, when we ruminate and we play all these like false narratives in our mind, we think people don't care. That shouldn't be your go-to. It should be like, they care. They just probably they're busy. They don't know. I need to reach out to this person. I need to say what's up. Like, I didn't know to do that. Why am I not thinking to do that? That's so simple. There's some friends that I have that I've lost contact with, that sometimes when I hit them up or they hit me up randomly, I tell them, I'm like, man, I should be doing this more. I don't know why, what's going on with me. And they're just like, yeah, like, what? Like, what? Like, why would you? Why would you feel nervous about calling me up out of the blue? Like, if I'm not picking up the phone, it's because I'm busy, not because I don't want to talk to you. I'm like, yeah,
It's
that's a good
it's
point.
easy. Yeah, social isolation though. Isolation. That could
Isol.
work.
We'll call no.
I,
We're gonna coin that a new phrase.
okay, yeah, social isolation, y'all. Heard it here
Yes,
first.
we just found a new title for your next book.
Okay, great, because I'm in deliberation on that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a real thing, and we get to it's that silo that we get back in, right? And that silo that we're meaning making machines, and we are making these assumptions about other people, making assumptions about what it means that they did or didn't answer, or projecting on them how they're going to feel about reaching out, or we
Yeah.
should is one of my least favorite words of all time. It's on the top of
Mhm.
my word diet. Like, it's got to go, because should is creating such guilt and shame and resentment on
No.
what, and judgment
And
around what
judgment.
other people should do, or what I should be able to handle this by myself. I
Yes.
shouldn't need to reach out to my friend
Yes.
and say that, hey, I'm
Yes.
struggling right now. I should have my shit together
Yes.
by this point in life, or whatever it is.
Yes. And those
And
are those are all so incorrect, and it's so weird, because now there's so many successful stories and there's so many statistics out there that would counter argue that and rip it apart in a second. I mean, obviously you can't succeed unless you get support. Like, you can't do it alone. It's impossible because you just can't do it alone. And if you're gonna be ruminating and thinking about, like, being shamed because you're not putting yourself out there, man, that's just such a miserable life. And I understand that people get a lot of anxiety about this. I understand that it's becoming much more common, but that means, what that all that means, is that we have to be able to do more and give ourselves more grace of opportunity. And that's
mhm,
what I always try to tell people. When you were saying what you were saying, it made me think about all of the entrepreneurs and business leaders and creative professionals that have come to me for advice, and how, like, you would think that, like, they would do the simple things, like the simple things. Well, you want to be a millionaire? Yeah, I want to be a millionaire. Well, why? Well, because, like, somebody like me should be a millionaire. Okay, cool. What is somebody like you? What does that mean? Like, is that what you're looking for? Is that going to make you happy? Is that going to make you feel successful? Well, yeah, of course. It's like, and I've heard, and even say, and this isn't like a man thing. I know that you know, I'm saying from the perspective of a man. But no, it's just this interesting thing, to your point, that it takes a little bit of thought and a lot less effort than you think to understand what you're all about and what you're really after and why you're doing the things that you're doing. And if you did that, you would save yourself a lot of pain and heartache.
Mm.
And again, I wrote this book, The Maguire Method. Through I wrote it. The catalyst was a broken heart, and I kept saying to myself, I was like, man, I would love to save people the trouble of what I went through, because this pain is unbearable. And I had to really take a hard look at myself and really like figure out ways of doing things that I never did before. So like even when meeting you outside, that was me taking on the mission of like, oh, I can work from anywhere. Like I don't have to be in an office. And that was like a lie I told myself. That was a lie, which is so weird because I was known for being an early adopter, especially with technology. So here I am being like, I have to be in an office. I have to get, you
Okay,
know,
old man.
yeah. And it was just so weird. It was just like, I was just like literally, but nobody was saying any of that to me. I was saying that to myself
Right.
as I'm clearly seeing the world. One of my clients at one point was WeWork. So, and I'm just literally like, well, maybe WeWork, I don't know. It's not the same. I don't know. And, I'm just literally like, okay, I have to like do something different. So like, yes, I understood that I wanted to share that. And that's something that I also put in the book as well, is like, you can also enhance your community and the environment that you have around you when you're sharing these ideas, because that's how people learn new ideas. Just like what we were saying about the Middle East conflict. If you don't share these ideas, if you don't talk about this with other people, then it's not going to go anywhere. But you can't just like judge people. You can't judge yourself. You can't judge the world around you. It's like no, be you can look at things through a critical lens, but you want to be asking yourself questions that's more of a problem solving lens
Mhm.
versus like owning a narrative that's self defeating.
There's something that I think just so beautifully ties back into almost where we started, around the idea of like having these conversations and maybe places that we don't traditionally have them, right? And like, how do we have more of these conversations at work? How do we recognize that we're whole ass humans doing this whole human ass thing, and maybe taking some time to ask some different questions and think about, reflect on some things differently, can get us to a different result. And there's a TEDx talk by, I'm blanking on the guy's name, Ted, I want to say Plattenberger right now,
Mhm.
where he
Okay.
breaks down the anatomy of results. And he's studied and worked with just elite performers across many different industries, and has been able to kind of really break it down into three things that are required for results. There's intention, there's state, and then there's actions. And so
Hmm.
he always does this thing where he asks people like, which of those are the most important
Yeah.
out of all those three? And like, if you were
Yeah.
to split them up, percentage wise, like how are you currently moving about in your life with those things? And most people are like, action,
Yeah.
it's all the action.
Yeah.
And what he shares is that the most, industry bending performers are actually spend most of their time in their state of being,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that there's also such an importance on the intention, because
Yeah.
the intention is going to amplify their state of being.
Absolutely.
And then
Absolutely.
all of that will inform the very small part that is the actions. And I think that's where
Absolutely.
this goes all the way back to, as
Yeah.
the Maguire Method, as
Yeah.
something that really helps you get clear on your intention and your
Mhm.
state of being, so
Mhm.
that you can take better actions, right? And like, we all need some support in kind of clearing out the noise and finding a through line in that, so that we can get to the end results that we're looking for.
Yeah. You're spot on. I think you're absolutely correct. Yeah. That was a great exercise too that guy did. I think I remember that. Yeah. That was cool.
Yeah, he's a goodie. Well, CJ, I have a question that I ask all of my guests
Sure.
before they're allowed to leave the show, and that goes back to my gratitude practice. So every night before I fall asleep, I think of the three oddly specific things from my day that I'm most grateful for. And I'm only going to put you on the spot for one oddly specific thing that you are very grateful for in the
Mhm.
last 24 hours.
Um, when you say oddly specific, does it like have to be an odd thing that I'm grateful for, or do you mean that in a way of like because it's specific, it's odd?
Like, I want you to get oddly specific with it. Like, get
Yeah,
granular. You can't just be like, my bestie, because he's dope, right? Or
yeah.
whatever it might be.
No,
Like, I want you to get oddly
no.
specific
I
thing.
am I am. There's several things that I very elated about. I do practice gratitude in the small things and the big things. I'm very grateful to be back home in my old hometown. Even though we lived all around the world, I guess this is considered my old hometown. And I'm out here with my daughter, and like as soon as she's so excited to be here, and my parents are so excited to see her, and like everybody's festive and in the holiday spirit. And I'm like, wow, I'm really grateful that there's a lot of generational curses that are being broken. I'm really grateful that I can be supportive of my daughter. I'm very grateful that she's happy and laughing and running around. Um, and I'm very grateful that I get to be on this podcast with you. I do believe in serendipity. I do believe in like everything happening for a reason, and it's awesome to be able to share knowledge, to learn, to listen uh, to someone like yourself, and to talk about my book like that. I'm a published author, which sounds fucking gnarly. So I'm stoked on that, and it wasn't an easy journey. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, but I'm so grateful that I finished it, and I finished it, and I probably still could have tweaked things. I probably still could have done things, but to the conversation that we're having, I understood, which is the thing I'm most grateful for with this, is that I wanted to be able to share something with someone from my heart, and the fact that I was able to do that before the year is out, I can't say that there's nothing more than I'm grateful for than that.
Well, congratulations. It is truly a labor of love. It is really one of the most beautiful books that I've ever seen. Thanks to the photography, y'all. He's got clouds in it. It's off. If you really know me, you know how much I love clouds and sunsets, and I'm going to spoil this. The opening chapter is called Sunrise, and the closing chapter is called Sunset. And there's literally neon clouds and other beautiful clouds throughout this whole thing. I'm biased about how beautiful this book is, but I really
Thank
do want to give you
you.
some roses on the marketing, on how you've been sharing about this. It's truly a work of art, and
Thank you.
I just acknowledge that labor of the heart that went into it, so that we can all connect more and learn from each other, and have some great frameworks and ways to think about things differently.
I
If
appreciate that.
my audience wants to find you, where can they do that?
Yeah, you can find me on the socials. It's at CJ Johnson Jr. Also have a website, www.cjjohnsonjr.com. The Maguire Method is available on Amazon, ebook and paper book, and yeah,
Get
yeah,
the real book. Get the real. It's like
you gotta
getting
get
a
the real book.
coffee table for sure, though.
It's when I made that book, as weird as it sounds, I made it specifically to be paperback and to be a certain size that you
Mhm.
can carry in your purse or bag or with you. The way that I imagined it is me folding my book, putting it in my back pocket while I'm like hiking up a mountain just to like watch the sun go down. That was like
Dope.
in my mind. That's what I imagined.
Well,
So
it fits perfectly in like my favorite like crossbody bag that I take
yeah.
to any adventure. So you nailed it. Nailed it.
Yeah, yeah. If you go to a cafe or do any of that stuff, and you just set it out there, I want somebody to walk by and be like, "What is that?"
Ooh, the Maguire
The
method.
Maguire
Tell
Method.
me more.
Oh, you didn't know?
Oh, well, let me put you on.
He's like, first we're gonna do breath work, but then you're gonna read the Maguire Method.
Yeah, y'all, I literally made CJ do some breath work because we had some technical difficulties getting onto this call. So I'm like, excuse me while I Palo Santo, and do you want to breathe with me? And he was like, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for rolling with the punches on this. I'm so grateful for you sharing your creativity, for your voice, for your heart in this book, your time and energy in this podcast. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope you and your loved ones have such a wonderful holiday.
Thank you so much. I hope you do too.
All right, thanks. We'll talk soon.
All right, talk soon. Bye.